Hi, everyone. This is Jason Burack of Wall Street for Main Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street for Main Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is Luisa Moreno, who's a PhD and a master's in mining engineer, and she also is the metals and mining analyst of Euro-Pacific Canada, and she's a specialist of the rare earths market. So thank you for joining us here today on a podcast, Luisa.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And we're glad to have you, and our listeners have really cared about rare earths, and I think it's a really good value sector at this point, especially since, in my opinion, the bubble has burst, and a lot of the stocks, some of them, except for the last couple of months, were down more than 80% over the last, really since mid of 2011. Can you talk about what happened during the rare earths bubble and all the financing and stuff like that? It was just getting ludicrous at one point.
Yes, I mean, there was a significant, I would say, significant bull market for the rare earth. It was, to a great extent, fueled by the news out of China. There was somewhat a panic, perhaps from end users, and the changes that China made were very significant. We know that the exports were about 60,000 tons out of China at one point, and those exports were cut down to 30. And obviously, many end users were concerned with that, and that story in a market that was I would say somewhat healthy at that time, end of 2010 and early 2011, sort of led to the bull market in the rare earth. So things then turned around. I think at the beginning of 2011, there was a tsunami in Japan, and as you know, Japan is the largest consumer of rare earths outside China, and there was an impact there in that economy. There was overall as well, I think, in 2011, and we're still experiencing that slowdown in the global economy. So that that slowdown, I think, had an impact overall in commodities, and the rare earths were no exception to that as well. So I think that that was in part the reason of the fall in rare earth prices and the stocks as well. And I suspect there was a lot of stockpiling when China started announcing all the restrictions that they were planning to. It is possible that we might have, many of end users and trading houses might have stockpiled significant rare earths as well. So when the economy sort of slows down, there's a lot of stockpile. All of that could have potentially led to the decrease in prices for the rare earths, decrease in demand, decrease in prices, and then therefore a decrease in the stock prices as well.
That's a good summary, and you brought up a lot of different points in there, and it's going to take us the whole interview probably to get through all of them. You have the Japan-China conflict, which started, I think, in 2010, right, with the fishing boat incident,
Yeah.
and then China played the rare earths monopoly card
Correct.
on Japan. And now you have the other conflicts there that just continue over another island, I think, instead of just the fishing boat. And now I think rare earths are being in there. And you have the Japanese corporations like Mitsubishi, Toyota, and these guys,
Right.
which are trying to do end-user offtake agreements and go all over the planet looking for safe, secure rare earth supply outside of China.
Correct. That is definitely a lot of that. And I think the Japanese have probably sensed that China was going to constrain the market, and they've been for many years now looking for projects, rare earth projects around the world, and they have collaborations that in Vietnam and collaborations in Kazakhstan that we saw announced this week with Sumitomo and Kazakh-Prom, I believe that's the name of the Uranium company, state-owned, the agreement between those two companies. So I think the Japanese have been fortunate in some of those projects, and the pain, I will call it pain, is being somewhat mitigated, exactly, but not completely solved.
Yeah, and on top of that, Luisa, I've also noticed that there's been a lot of PR press releases from companies like Toyota and Honda and these guys over the last, 18 months or so, coming out saying that we're working on magnets that are using less dysprosium. We're going to try to use less rare earth usage, but I mean, there's only so much they can cut back, right, on a number of rare earth products.
Absolutely. I mean, they also have to make the decision of whether they want to, have sacrifice the efficiencies that they are having in some of these products that use rare earths, and have by decreasing the use of the rare earths or eliminate them altogether, and sacrifice efficiency of some of these products. So if that's a decision they have to make, because then they leave China in an advantage position going forward when the economy goes back to normal, because eventually it is going to recover. We just don't know when, because it's obviously always a cycle. But that's a technology decision that Japan has to take, and I find it hard to believe that they will decide to completely eliminate rare earths one way or the other.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think they're going to completely design out rare earths. I think they're just going to work on some of those magnet-making capabilities, like with what Molycor in their JV deal with Mitsubishi and Daido Steel is doing, where they make magnets using less dysprosium. And I think the Japanese firms are just going to hedge their bets, where they diversify their supply chain outside of China all over the globe, and then they also work on using less dysprosium, I guess, in their magnets and other products. As we change here to the actual rare earth pricing, the rare earth prices, a lot of the lights, the prices have just come down so much in more than the last 12 months. The prices have dropped a lot that not even the Chinese producers can make any money doing it anymore. China is cutting back massively on allowing licenses for their miners. They're consolidating the industry, and they're reducing the export quota. How are rare earth miners outside of China then going to be able to make money going forward then if the light prices are dropping so much?
Yes, I mean, I think many of the potential projects that are coming online, their costs should be of production should be relatively lower compared to potentially some of the projects that have more complex metallurgy. So in the case, for instance, of Molycorp, they always claim to have low costs that could be potentially competitive with the Chinese, potentially. I mean, we know there's a lot of changes happening in China. And so the government has a great deal of interest to sort of, I wouldn't say purposely see costs going up, but the fact that they are introducing regulations, I would sense that would lead to higher costs.
It looks to me, instead of wanting the cost to go up, it looks to me like that's a trade-off. They're willing to let the cost rise in exchange for putting a stable floor in underneath the actual rare earth prices. You
said it. So that will potentially level the playing field a little bit. So it's possible that some of these projects will become more competitive as well, because then the costs might be potentially comparable if that happens. But I think China will likely continue to be the lowest cost producer, but more than just competing in terms of costs, I think many of the end users outside China would like to see production outside China. And because the exports are subjected to quotas anyway, so the costs outside China for these products are higher anyways. So, I mean, I guess the decision will be eventually for the end users whether they're willing to pay slightly higher prices from outside China, even from China as well, but have a much better security of supply.
Yeah, I was talking with John Highway about that yesterday. I interviewed him yesterday, and he seemed to share that sentiment also, that the end users, in order to have like multiple streams of supply coming in from outside of China, are going to be willing to pay a little bit higher price for a secure supply, and I think I would too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that makes economic sense. For certain applications, the cost of rare earths is not really the most significant one. So I think there's a room for many of the applications like magnets and others like phosphorus and other applications where I think end users are willing to take higher prices for some of these elements, but have the security supply because that's really important for them.
Okay, very good. And you mentioned earlier about metallurgy of the deposits. Besides Molycorp, talk about some of the other companies with the deposits you like who have good metallurgy based on your research.
Right. I mean, the perception is, Jason, is that companies that have minerals that were processed before, and they have predominantly minerals that you could find in the literature, flow sheets for the recovery of rare earths, and those would be, as you know, bastnasite, and monazite, which Molycorp has. Linus has quite a lot of monazite as well. Other minerals would be xenotime. Luperite apparently was used in Russia. I don't know that we necessarily know whether that was necessarily economic, but it was processed in the past. So there are a number, and of course the dianerzortian clays, which are used in China and are the main source for the heavy rare earths. So outside of these few key minerals for the rare earths, other deposits have what I would say cocktail of different minerals, some more rare than others, and some also have a little bit of monazite and bastnasite, and a number of other minerals, which some are refractory and could be difficult to process. So companies that have deposits with some of the more rare minerals in a mix, in a cocktail of minerals, could end up having a difficulty when they're trying to target different minerals or different properties, compared to a company that has predominantly bastnasite, for instance, like Rare Elements Resources, or Frontier, which has predominantly monazite. So the perception is that those companies will have easier path to metallurgy. Another example, for instance, is Montero, that also has a bastnasite deposit in Africa, and they actually been able to produce samples of the concentrate and cerium oxide and so forth. So the perception again is that these light deposits with predominantly well-known minerals for the extraction of rare earths like bastnasite and monazite would have an advantage in the metallurgy.
Okay, and the problem I see with that is that Molycorp is going to bring a lot of production online. They're going to make magnets with a lot of those lights, and their magnets are going to use less heavies than normal. But then you have Linus potentially coming online. A Linus situation, in my opinion, is a disaster. It's a soap opera. You just keep hearing different news stories coming out day in, day out. For the market demand, besides Chinese heavy rare earth supply, what other deposits then are going to be able to supply some of the heavy rare earths, and where are these companies then making offtake agreements with potential heavy rare earth supply outside of China?
Yeah, the heavy rare earth supply is going to continue to be a difficult situation. Most of the deposits out there continue to be predominantly lights. I think, however, that some of the companies that have predominantly light rare earth, if they come to production, they might be able to produce a mineral concentrate, that have not a mineral concentrate. Sorry, they should be able to separate the light rare earth from the lights and produce a mixed rare earth oxide rich in heavies that they might not be able to separate themselves, but they could sell it to, in this case, potentially China. That's where most of the refineries are. This is usually called the SCG stream, and because it has some area European gadolinium and a number of the heavies. So I think if enough light deposits come online, their SCG stream could potentially be used. If somebody and I know there are parties that are interested in gathering that. Molycorp, for instance, could make use of that if they could, collect SCG streams, or some people call it the mixed heavy rare earth concentrate, and that could be potentially a source for the heavies while we're waiting for the development, of course, of the heavy rare earth deposits that we know. There are a number of them. Tasman has a very large deposit in Sweden. The target production is 2016. If everything goes according to plan, and they have a UGL deposit. Another company has an UGL deposit, Matmac. They also have an agreement, a JV agreement with Toyota Tsusho, and they actually are fairly advanced, it seems, and they're planning to bring a bankable, definitive feasibility study by the second quarter of 2013, and make a decision at that time whether to develop the mine or not. So there are not a lot of companies in the near term that will be able to produce heavies, but some of the light deposits might be in the near term a source if they end up being developed first, of course. So that's the way I see it. Still, it's still a difficult situation, but so as I said, Tasman, Matmac, other deposits of interest is Namibia Rare Earth that has a large percentage of heavies, and the other one is Northern Minerals in Australia. They have a xenotime rich deposit, which could potentially have very simple mineralogy as well. I think they're looking to expand their resources. So, and then you have Tantalus that has an agreement with Rhodia. And they have, I believe, what is a deposit that mimics the iron adsorption clays, and they're looking at developing that as well. So there are a few. The volumes are not necessarily large, but the heavy market is not as large as the light market either. So it is possible that we will start seeing some of these heavy rare earth deposits being developed potentially by 2016, 2017.
Very, very good. And for our listeners, again, that company in Australia that you mentioned with the simpler metallurgy, I didn't hear the exact name of it.
That's called Northern Minerals.
Oh, Northern Minerals. Okay. Very good. And the thing I see about the rare earths market, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I think there's over 20 companies right now still, and there were hundreds, but I think there's more pain to come. Wall Street doesn't really want to finance them. To be honest, the Wall Street people I've talked to, the money managers, still don't understand the sector. They don't understand the vertical integration strategy. A lot of the American analysts who even cover the sector still don't understand the sector, in my opinion. The ones I've talked to and the research reports I've read from them, especially like their cash flow projections, they don't project anything on the vertical integration side from a Great Western Minerals or a Molycorp or anything like that. They just count the company as a mining company.
Yes. I guess it's also because they maybe they don't necessarily believe that it's going to be an easy path for some of these mining companies to go all the way to the actual magnet production. So there's so many different steps. You produce the compound, then you have to produce the metal, and then you have to produce the alloy and then the magnet. So there's so many different steps. It's not easy. So
and it's difficult.
It is difficult.
Yeah, but that's why the profit potential is so large, because it's not easy and everyone can't do it.
Exactly. So there is definitely a potential there, but I think analysts will have to have confidence as well that they can do it.
Okay, great. And do you expect more consolidation, more M&A in the sector over the next 2 years? Because I just don't see, like you mentioned, some of these companies, and they have JV deals or offtake agreements with juniors that are going into production in 2016 or 2017. The juniors that don't have those agreements, I don't see them being able to get financing. I think it's going to be a major issue for them without being able to get an end-user offtake agreement or be acquired by a Molycorp or a Great Western Minerals or one of those other companies already with profits.
Right. It all depends on the cash position of these companies with already profits. So I'm not sure that Molly or even Great Western that they are, I would actually say, potentially struggling to gather all the funds that they need to reach production. Whether they will be in a position right now of any consolidation, you could think of them using their paper to consolidate as well. But again, I'm not sure that at the prices where they are, if that's appealing. But that said, I think a consolidation is due. It has been due for a long time. But I'm not sure, given where the market is and the prices of the rares are, whether we will see that right now. I think the rares companies need to be talking to each other a little bit more. There was a lot of competition.
Yeah,
there was a lot of competition in the beginning, and they need to be looking at those that have similar deposits and potentially similar metallurgy, collaborating a little bit more. And that could potentially lead to some consolidation. But until they realize that they need to collaborate more, and I think we're starting to see that. Avalon, for instance, sponsored a metallurgy conference in Niagara in last month, I believe, in October. And a lot of its peers participated. Was open discussion. So I think that's the kind of things that we need to see more, and that might lead to a consolidation. But until everybody thinks that the project is better than the other, so you need to see.
But none of these guys have any. Sorry to interrupt you, but almost none of these guys have the capital on their balance sheet already to be able to bring the project into production. So ultimately then it's going to come down to who can get financing, what the financiers say, whose project is better. And I'm thinking the sector is going through, one of those painful boom-bust uranium type phases, and I think the uranium sector is down to maybe 7 or 8 companies due to all the mergers and acquisitions in that sector. So that's what I expect.
Right. But the other thing also that we need to think is that the market for the rare earths it's not that large right now. I mean, according to SGS, it's 130,000. There are suggestions that it could be perhaps twice that because there is a black market in China. Either way, it is, it cannot absorb 400 projects that, have been identified, for instance. So just naturally, because of the size of the market, I think the first players will have an advantage, or the projects that are more advanced. But at this stage, it's just hard to see which ones are most advanced, just because metallurgy plays such an important role. And until they're able to sort of cross that mark, they all end up to be in a very similar situation. So you can define a large resource, but ultimately if you cannot find an economic way of recovering it, you're not better off than the next player that just found, for instance, an iron adsorption clay or a xenotime deposit, because that those minerals are easy to process, for instance. So it is a complex space. And I think some companies are, especially those that are low in cash in a market like that, might end up out of the radar. But I think those projects that are looking better, you're right. They should sit down and collaborate. But I think that there has to be a willingness from the part of these companies to collaborate in order for us to see some consolidation in the space.
Very good, and that's, I think, something that's important. I think these guys are going to be the ones who don't already have all their financing in place, like Molycorp, Great Western Minerals. Mm-hmm. They're going to be fighting for the financing, the scraps that are left, because the money's not going to be handed out anywhere near the levels it was even 18 months ago. As we switch topics here, as we focus on one more final big picture item, do you expect the supply-demand fundamentals on either the supply side or the demand side to change for rare earths over the next 2 years?
Yes, I think it will. I think as these projects advanced, there will be more confidence about the supply, and I think we will see more interest. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the green technologies like wind turbines and others that could spur the demand for rare earth. Also, just the whole smart device boom that we have been seeing in the last few years, despite the weak economy. If this continues to expand into emerging markets, I think rare earth demand could also rise from that. So I do expect to see an increase in demand. Hopefully, if supply is there, right? So I think producers need to feel confident that there is supply in order to build in their productions the use of these elements. And I think there's enough projects out there that could sort of, if they progress at the right pace, in the right manner, that could give the end users the confidence that they need to counter these elements and count them in and build them in, engineering them into their products. So I think if things fall into place, and I think they could, I think we have a lot of projects, probably more than we need right now, but that could lead to an increase in demand for these materials, and I think the supply will be there in the long term for sure.
Yeah, and I think a reliable supply outside of China, I think as the price has now gotten lower and become a little bit more stabilized at a lower level, I think people are going to spend more money on research and development coming up with new products. And some of those products, like you already mentioned, have already hit the market. You have the smartphones. People want new technology. They're addicted to new technology. They want to buy a new iPhone or an iPod or an iPad whenever it comes out. They want smaller, thinner, and lighter. And I don't see that changing globally at all, really, because, the technology makes you more efficient. You can use apps. You don't have to be at a desktop to do all your work. You can do work on your smartphone or on your tablet. Yeah,
you said it. You absolutely said it. I think that is significant research is happening. Actually, I think the U.S. has recognized that they need to invest more, and I think they are. The Department of Energy is investing more in the rare earth. Some of that investment is going towards finding ways of recycling it, but also I think to some extent there is significant research being developed around the world these days to find ways to recover these materials and also the applications of them. So I think the future is bright for the rare earth. Investors need to be, I guess, patient and smart in valuing these companies and understanding the progress of them. We wanted many of them to be in production in 2014 and 2015. It might be a bit later than many of us expected in the beginning, but there is significant work that is being going on in terms of understanding the metallurgy, the recovery of these materials and the applications. And for those that believe in human ingenuity, they should be betting on that because eventually it will happen. And if these prices stabilize, and if they even stabilize at the levels that they are, it's still above the historical 2007, 2006, and so forth prices, and that will make these projects economic.
Very good, and those are some excellent points. And as we wrap up the interview here, I have one more final question. You talked about the future of rare earths. Are there any new type of rare earths products that are still in the laboratory now or being tested or getting pretty close to commercialization that you think could really grow the demand side for rare earths?
I've been hearing about the applications of rare earth in agriculture. There are a number of papers, and I could send it to you as well. So that could lead to a large demand for some of these elements if you start using them as fertilizers. I'm talking about lanthanum, cerium, and others. So I think that could change significantly the supply and demand balance for these elements.
That's very interesting that they would actually be used for some sort of fertilizer compound. I never heard that one before.
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Okay, well, as we wrap up the interview, Luisa, I just want to thank you very much for your time, and please tell our listeners where they can find your work.
So they can just come to our website, Euro Pacific Canada, and they can register, and from there on they could download our research and have access to our updates of the various companies.
Okay, great. And thank you very much for your time, Luisa, and for helping our listeners understand the rare earths and giving them an update on the sector. And hopefully we can have you back on soon.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.